I'm James Daly and this is my Boosted Mini X. I've had my Boosted Mini X for almost a year now, and that's given me a really good amount of time to work out what works really well, what could be improved, and how the board holds up over that period of time. I'll be breaking this review up into a couple of different sections. We'll be looking at ride comfort, durability, performance and maintenance, and I'll also then be revisiting my original review of this board, the one I made after 3 months, and we'll see if my pros and cons from then hold up to a year later. So as a brief introduction, the Boosted Mini S and the Mini X are the combination of boosted boards, fantastic electric skateboard tech, just in a much smaller package. Now, being a smaller board, that does bring some definite trade-offs and some definite advantages, and we'll get into those right now. Let's get started with ride comfort, which is arguably the most important factor. Right from the get-go, this is a fun board. This is a very, very fun board. It's a perfect adjective for a board of this particular skateboard. It's fast, it's powerful, it's zippy, it's maneuverable, and that smaller form factor really heightens all of those factors. I can't state enough how nice it is to have a kicktail on an electric skateboard. Being able to turn quickly without having to bend down and pick up the board and move it around. Being able to tic-tac, being able to move around people in more crowded spaces or get up and down curbs when you need to. It makes a really big difference. Popping it when you're done riding is also super satisfying. It's just a massive improvement to maneuverability. So this kicktail combined with the smaller size results in a board that feels powerful but nimble, fast but really controllable, especially in areas that have either high pedestrian traffic or in areas that you need to move around tighter spaces, sharp corners or just smaller streets that you just need to get around a bit more nimbly. However, there is a flip side to having that kicktail on that shorter deck. You have smaller wheels, you have zero flex, and you have a smaller board to disperse bumps and any sort of rough terrain you're riding over. I thought I'd be fine with that because I normally ride these little cruisers all the time. These are my standard skateboards. But once I sat down and thought about it, I realized that when I'm riding those, I'm always pushing, of course. There's no motor in those. So the distances I ride and the surfaces I ride on are limited inherently by the form factor of the board and me pushing. As soon as you have this though, you can ride anywhere you want and you want to ride anywhere you want. You want to ride for longer, you want to go further, and you want to go on different types of surfaces and roads. So you're suddenly riding on terrain that you never would previously with a board like that. So you can't really compare the two. And you start riding on terrain that may not be as suited for a short board as a longer board or something with a bit more flex in it. What I'm trying to say is the board rattles, especially on rougher terrain. It's like it dances under your feet. You really have to concentrate when you're going over anything that's more rough than a smooth road to keep control of this board, especially at speed. Now, given that most of these surfaces happen at speed and with cars kind of behind me or next to me, it can get a little bit worrying in terms of control and comfort when you're riding it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm really glad I bought a shorter board. I love how subtle it is, I love how portable it is, how easy it is to carry and pick up and move around. And I love how most people don't know you're riding a very loud in-your-face electric skateboard. But this lack of suspension and this lack of kind of flex is a real thing. It is something you need to keep in mind. This really comes down to knowing your area or where you'll be riding really well. Where I live, the roads look like this, and it's just a bit painful and uncomfortable to ride on. However, if you live in an area with bike lanes, flat roads, or smooth surfaces, the Boosted Mini X is a dream to ride. To make your decision, think about where you will most likely be riding this board, what your commute looks like, what the area around where you live looks like, what the infrastructure looks like in terms of bike lanes. The board is a dream to ride on smooth, flat roads like this. But most of the roads around Sydney look like this, so think about your commute, think about the surfaces you ride on, as that's going to have a big impact on what board you should buy and which board you'll enjoy the most and get the most out of. Another thing to keep in mind with ride comfort, this is less the physical side of things and more riding an electric skateboard. They're still relatively new, so people are going to look at you. You're going to stand out on the road, especially when you take off flying up a hill from a dead stop. These are not anywhere near as ubiquitous as a bike on the road, so I've had cars honk, I've had people call out, I've had people get pretty annoyed at me actually at certain points, and I'm just riding normally like any cyclist. So if you wanted to fade into the background, I don't think these are quite common enough a sight yet on roads that you'll be doing that. That is, I know that seems like a slightly obvious thing to say, but it does come back to ride comfort. How comfortable you feel on the board and how comfortable you feel on the road, so keep that in mind as well. In terms of stacks, I've really only had one major fall on this board. It was tripped up just by a bump in the pavement, again, lack of suspension, but I guess that happens to any skateboard. The difference is there's a motor on this one, so you're going a lot faster than any skateboard when you hit these bumps. So keep that in mind. You'll constantly be scanning the road in front of you for any sort of bumps and lifts in the footpath. But yes, I'm pretty lucky. Only that one major stack, and after a couple of physio appointments to my shoulder, I was all right in the end. But that will probably happen to you if you buy an electric skateboard. You will. Everyone has a story or two of a few major stacks. It's all part of getting used to it. So keep in mind, you're going to be pretty carefully scanning the area in front of you as you ride to avoid these cracks and these bumps. The main takeaway here with ride comfort is when the conditions are good, the Mini X it's heaven to ride. It's incredibly powerful, really responsive, maneuverable, zippy. The torque is great. It feels very controllable under your feet. It's wonderful. But once conditions start to deteriorate, that can change, and that does depend on where you ride and the surfaces around you. If things get a bit rough, things can go downhill pretty quickly. Skateboard puns. All right, let's take a look at durability. Now, obviously, no skateboard is going to, look as pristine as it does the day you buy it. They're designed to be used, abused, ridden, all terrains, most weathers. They're designed to be used. So this doesn't obviously look how it did when I bought it, but it has held up incredibly well. The materials are clearly very high quality. I'm talking both the deck on top and of course everything underneath here, the batteries and the trucks and the wheels. Everything has held up wonderfully well. Now, just to go through a couple of things that have changed over that year, the wheels have changed color, they've faded a bit, they've been used, they've been worn in. The grip tape on the top here, again, has also slightly faded and obviously had, dirt and everything worn into it as I've used it. And we've got some fraying around here on the end of the kick tail here, where I'm always popping it up or using it as a kick tail would be used. The good news is though, that's just the surface area grip tape, as you can see here. The deck underneath has held up incredibly well. There's barely a mark on it. So it is well made. It is just the surface level grip tape here that is peeling off. I did actually have rubber ends on both ends for a little while and then realized the board underneath is so well made that they're not needed and they just kind of got in the way in the end. So I've just been using it as is and it's held up great. Now I've had to change the belts here, I think just twice over this year, 2 or 3 times. Now that's just going to happen when you have a belt-driven board. The belts wear out. They're constantly, turning the teeth of the wheels and the motor. You're going to have to change them. Keep that in mind as well. Always good to have a spare 1 or 2 in your bag because they do fail sometimes at inopportune times, such as going up a hill on your way home, which has happened to me. But that's fine. It's good to expect that and be prepared for that. So they were very easy to change, very easy to swap over, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the maintenance section. The bash guards here are, as the name suggests, taking most of any sort of damage that the board comes across while riding, and they've held up very, very well. They've protected everything the way they should, so that's done really well after a year. The wheels are starting to show some signs of cracking and chipping based on what they're hitting as we ride. You can see some of them here, some cracks and some chunks taken out of them. So I'll end up looking at changing them soon as well. In terms of everything else, we've got some slight scratches here on the battery, but I mean, it's so solid here that these scratches barely get in the way of anything. It's well made enough that I wouldn't even worry about that. Now there is some slight surface rusting on some of the bolts here on the trucks. I don't know if that's a function of me living at the beach with all the salt air, or if that's just what happens when you ride through the occasional puddle when you're riding. But it doesn't seem to be anything structural, it's more surface level, so that's not too bad at all. So this leads in quite nicely to maintenance and what you'll be doing to look after the board. Now I've had to take apart the wheels, the belts and the motor a couple of times, and you will need to do that. As the wheels turn and the belt's turning, little bits of dirt and dust do get stuck in the grooves here in the teeth, and they compress and they end up being a real hard lump of something in between there. And you'll hear that as a click as you ride. Sometimes it could be something else, but that's what I've found to be causing this clicking noise occasionally. So yeah, you take it apart, you clean it out, and that's what you'll be doing as the most common task, looking after one of these. I do it every couple of weeks. I could probably do it more often. But yeah, you take the wheel off, you take the belt motor off, you get a little thing in there and pop out any sort of dirt that's caught in the grooves of the teeth. Now that process of taking it apart was very, very easy. Boosted actually have a video on their own YouTube channel, walking through every step of what to unscrew, what to take off next, what to then put on, the order to do everything in, and they explain it really nicely, so I had no real troubles there. And after you do it once, it makes perfect sense to just remember how to do it further down the track. So it's good to know how to look after it yourself. And that cleaning in there is really the main thing you'll be doing to look after the board. Something to mention as well, this was a known issue with a number of boosted boards. I had to get the whole engine replaced, or the whole motor replaced, a couple of months into owning the board. There's some known issue about the motor making a strange noise. The Boosted were fantastic about that. They sent out a new motor from the US within just a couple of days. And I have a local skate shop that is an authorized boosted board, I guess, repair center. I don't know what the actual name is for that. And they helped me swap it over and got it all installed very quickly. Now that level of support and that network of these authorized repair shops is something really important to consider when you're looking at which board to buy. I know that Boosted has a reputation for being a bit more expensive, but it is always good to weigh up that level of customer support and repairability and just that support network they've built around the world as part of your consideration when you're buying an electric skateboard. I've been pretty thankful to be able to take this in whenever there's an issue, be able to ask a question and have them show me how it all works, especially with a known issue like that, rather than just waiting and wondering what's happening. So that is something else that, in terms of maintenance, had to get something replaced and boosted. They were pretty quick and very easy to deal with. Points there. All right, performance. This is fantastic in terms of performance. I've not found any hill anywhere around me that it can't fly up. I've never really, hit top speed and thought, I really wish this could go faster. Now, granted, I'm not a speed freak on these at all. I mainly use it for commuting, back and forth from home to work. But I do get up a bit of speed. It's very hard to resist going fast on these because they're so much fun and feel so controlled. So I do get up there, and I've never ever thought, I wish it accelerated faster. I wish it could go faster, because there is some oomph in the board, especially with acceleration. So performance from me, massive tick. It's fantastic. The downside here is what we mentioned earlier. Depending on the surface you're riding this on, especially some of the roads around where I live, they're very, very rough surface. That speed and that acceleration can sometimes feel a little bit too fast, a little bit sometimes out of control, given how the board rattles and dances under your feet, being a smaller board with no flex at certain speeds. So it does have its flip side there, but under a heading of performance, great, fantastic. Okay, let's revisit my thoughts from my original review of this board from when I owned it only 3 months, and we'll see how my initial thoughts and my pros and cons hold up after a year of using the board. So let's get started with the app. I still use the Ride app over the Boosted app. I think it's just a much better app. It's got some really clever features in it, such as that auto ride tracking. As soon as you start riding, it starts tracking your ride. Charging notifications, it'll alert you when you're at 90% and then 100%. In case you want to only stick to 90% and have a bit of room in the brakes for that regenerative braking. And the mapping features are just so much nicer on the Ride app. So I still use that. If you download that, I'll put a link in the description. Send a couple of dollars the developer's way for the work he's put into that app. It's a good app. Okay, the weight. I had a lot to say about the weight in my last video. I said it was quite cumbersome, quite difficult to carry around, and that it was a heavy board. All of that is still true. It is not a light board. I think, though, that perspective will come across a lot stronger if you're like me and you're used to riding these. This is what you've ridden before. You look at this and you think, oh yeah, it's the same general size. It's a short board. It should be just as portable as this. Not the case. I know that sounds obvious, being an electric board, but it is quite deceptive when you pick it up and you go, oh, gee, that's 7 kilos there. So it is a heavy board, but you do get used to that as you use it and hold it and ride it and carry it around. You start to think, okay, if I'm going somewhere, I'm going to need to carry it for an hour or so in between rides. I might think about a different way to do this. I might find a locker. I might not bring it. I don't know, but it is something you do get your head around and you do get used to. Not saying it's a light board in any respect, but what can you do with a board that has a motor on the bottom and goes this fast? On that note, carrying the board is still a little bit of a headache. You get used to it, but it's always just that little bit annoying. I mean, Boosters longboards, have their battery and motor at either end, and they have a nice cutaway in the middle, which is perfect for your hips or your side as you carry the board, as you would expect to carry a skateboard. The Mini, of course, just has battery and motor all the way across, which makes this rounded shape, which means it's very hard to carry on your side. A maul grip is really the only way I've found it's a comfortable way to hold it, but the grip tape is still incredibly aggressive, even after a year. So keep in mind, you may be ripping into your clothing a bit, you may be hurting your fingers a little bit when you pick it up, and it's very rough. much more rough than any of these or other electric skateboards. Boosted use a very rough grip tape, or on the Mini X at least, which means that every time I pick it up, you just have to think a bit extra about where are my hands going, how am I carefully going to hold this. It's not really like you just pick it up and forget about it. Carrying can be a bit annoying, which sounds strange for a shorter board, but it is, yeah, something to keep in mind there. Okay, the charger. You get used to this. I originally said it was quite big and bulky and got in the way. It was too large to carry around. But you actually, your routine kind of solves this for you. For example, I leave mine here at the office all the time. I never even take it home. And using an app like Ride, where it alerts you when your battery is getting a little bit lower, you can start to plan around when you charge your board. So this ended up being a complete non-issue. It is a large charger. Hasn't bothered me at all. I just leave it plugged in. When the board needs charging, you just plug it in when you hear it, wherever you leave your charger, at home or at the office. So no worries there, charger's fine. Okay, the remote. Now this is still the nicest control I've found for an electric skateboard. The springiness and pushback in the wheel is perfect. Having a kill switch down the bottom here to hold down while you do ride is a perfect addition. Everything's just where you expect it to be. So functionally, the remote's fantastic. I still think it's missing features. Even a small screen that gives an indication of battery level of the remote, or battery level of the board, or the speed you're riding, or what mode you're in. I think it needs a screen, especially with more and more competitors releasing remotes that do have a small screen on there. It also just feels a little flimsy, a little plasticky, which, no big deal, but it's just an odd comparison to the board that feels so vehicle grade and so high quality that the remote feels like a hollow shell with a little bit inside it. So yeah, the remote works well, it does its job, it's comfortable to use, but lack of screen, the mini USB being the charging port and old technology is a bit annoying as well. It could be so much better, it just could be fantastic, it's close. But yeah, that's the thoughts on the remote. All right, finally, weight distribution. I showed a clip of this in my previous video, how the board is so front-loaded with all the weight down here that it made it really hard to tic-tac. That's still the case. I've never really got used to that. It's not like I go out and I'm tic-tacking on this like I would on one of these. It's still a strange distribution of weight. So the kicktail here, you'll end up using more for quick turns to get out of the way of things, for popping it up when you finish riding, but you probably won't be tic-tacking back and forth or using it overly for too much steering. It'll be more leaning. So main takeaway, how does this feel to ride and own and use on a daily basis? In short, it's wonderful. It's like the world opens up to you. It's, yeah, the torque and the power, the control and the speed in this thing that they've packed into this little board is, you got to ride it to feel that. It's really, really fun. If you're a skater already and you're used to riding things like this, you'll love that all the joy of cruising and relaxing comes to this, and all the hard parts of pushing and the annoying parts are just stripped away. You just get to enjoy it. If you're new to skating, there may be a bit of a learning curve as you get used to it, but once you do, it's like nothing else. It's a fantastic board. So my final thoughts. The quality of the materials, the customer support, the performance of the engine, Boosted have made something pretty amazing with this, and I'm really, really happy with it. It definitely falls into the vehicle category rather than a toy. It feels like, you know, a heavy-duty, high-quality machine to get around. If you've weighed up the pros and cons of a shorter board and that lack of flex, and say the area around you is nice and smooth or has bike lanes, or you're just not too worried about a rough surface, then I don't think you'll be disappointed at all in the Boosted Mini X. So that's been the review. Let me know if you have any further questions down in the comments, and I'll get back to you there and I'll answer all your questions there. And I'd love it if you subscribed. I'm going to have some more videos like this out very soon. I actually have the X-Way X1 Pro will be our next review. So hopefully see you there, and thanks very much for watching. Okay, bye.